going to talk about is actually not what we do now, but kind of how we started and kind of what is a pivot, when should you pivot, how do you pivot, and kind of our process along the way. So speaking of failure, I'm going to talk about most of our failures as a company. So this is going to be interesting, but kind of rough to follow you, Miha. I'll fucking swear a lot, I promise. So your idea is probably wrong. That's probably one of the first things to realize when you start a company is that even if you get funding on an idea, you probably have the wrong idea. I mean, a startup, as defined by Steve Blank, is a search for a scalable, repeatable business model, right? If you are at a position in your company where it isn't scaling, it's time to kind of think again. What is a pivot? Eric Ries, some of you know who he is, kind of the founder of the Lean Startup methodology, says that the idea that successful startups can change direction but stay grounded in what they learned, right? So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is some companies that have pivoted. Some of you have heard of, some maybe you didn't know that's what they first started with. And then walk through our progression as a company, what we did at the beginning, what we did along the way, and kind of briefly touch upon what we do now, and then kind of talk about some lessons learned that we figured out along the way. And don't be scared, right? Because everyone pivots. If you look at this screen, for example, how many people know what this app is? Game Never Ending. No one? So this is the app that the Flickr guys wrote before they wrote Flickr. They started as a social multiplayer gaming company and entirely shifted their business model and made billions of dollars. So PayPal. Another great example. So PayPal, this is like, if you know what the Wayback Machine is, go check it out. Type in PayPal from like the 90s. PayPal lets you beam money to anyone with a Palm organizer. How many people still have a Palm organizer? Not a lot of hands raised. So obviously they went from beaming money between palms to just printing money, or at least making a lot of money off international exchange rates. Again, obviously ended with something not what they started with. And this idea is not just, internet companies. Panasonic or National, a Japanese company, started making these bike lamps. Now you probably own their TVs, their media players. Nintendo, another interesting one. They were a playing card company, right? They made like cards that people play games with on tables. Then they became one of the best console gaming companies on the planet. Obviously entirely different from what they started. So what's our story? I'm going to talk about 4 public pivots that we know about or we've talked about as a company, but there really are hundreds of pivots that you go through as an entrepreneur, that most of which are failures, so you don't like to share, but I'm going to share a couple of the ones that people may have seen. So this is kind of where we started. We created a company called Hungry Machine. Hungry Machine means a lot to me. It's still the parent company of our organization. It's an attitude of how you live and how you work, and about constantly being hungry about what your idea is. We all 4 of us worked at a company together. We all left right as the Facebook platform was taking off, and we built a consulting company. The rule was we had some product ideas of our own, but we had no money because we just all quit our jobs. So at any point in time, 2 of us had to be doing consulting jobs, and 1 of us could be working on our internal apps. And then as soon as any consulting gig was over, everyone got to rotate. So life didn't suck entirely. It just sucked most of the time. We had some silly games on Facebook. Everyone was throwing potatoes and sheep and stuff, and we didn't know what we were going to do there, but we built some apps for some companies. So we had an MSA with Disney. We built apps for ESPN. We built Animoto's Facebook app. We built a lot of apps for people that, and that was sort of the way that we funded ourselves as we were working on a product that we called at the time Visual Bookshelf. So Visual Bookshelf was this idea that you wanted to say which books you're reading, which books you want to read, which books you have read. We got millions of users to use this thing. It was the largest book site on the internet at the time. And it was awesome. We had users. We didn't have a lot of revenue. We thought maybe we could expand. So I thought, I'm a big sort of craft beer fan. We expanded into beer, and music, movies, restaurants, Slopes. Slopes was, I do not know why we did Slopes. It had like 4 users, but we thought maybe people like to go skiing. We expanded this platform, and we spent a year building this site where you could connect with anything you cared about. We collected billions of pieces of data points on things that were interesting, and we sort of survived on this idea of affiliate revenue, right? So, but there's sort of a problem with affiliate revenue. There's like this little buy link somewhere on the site. If you use Amazon's and you can't use other people's because there's affiliate relationships. But nonetheless, yay, you just made 50 cents because someone clicked on this book. The book is $8. You get 5, 6, 7, 8% of that price. Do you know how many people have to click on this freaking link for you to run a business and pay 4 people? Lots, right? So back to the scalable business model, didn't really work. Took it a step further. We said, fine, we have all this data. We know the book publishing companies want to reach out to these users because we already know what they want to read and the book publishers want to get at those people. We did these like MySpace-esque full site reskins and we did a lot of public book launches. But I just thought it made our site look kind of stupid. And it wasn't a scalable business model. We had a large sales team that had to go out and find these publishers. They had to find these book deals. We were struggling for sort of people's online social media budgets. Even though we had millions of users and arguably we had a successful company, none of us were happy with where it was. Then about a year later, we built this app called Pick Your 5. So Pick Your 5 was a really simple extension on top of collecting your interests, and you just picked 5 things you cared about. It popped up in your feed. These 5 little pictures showed up. And it obviously was built on all of the tools that we had built to build this other LivingSocial product where you could talk about books and talk about movies. So the actual development of the first version took like an hour. We pushed it out to production. Facebook had just launched this feed change, and this thing really took off, right? So we started with our first 6 or 7 content areas, and then we started adding hundreds more. People asked us to add categories for celebrities, for my top favorite cereals, for the 5 countries I've last been. We added hundreds and hundreds of categories. This app grew from 0 to 35 million users in 3 weeks, right? One of our goals was to become the #1 app on Facebook. We did it, right? Success, awesome, cool. Very cool because we had this large reach, but still we weren't happy. Right? The reason why we weren't happy was it was really hard to sustain that level of traffic. Like our servers were getting 4 to 5 billion hits a month, right? So lots and lots of traffic. I got home one night, late at night, turned on CNN, and I saw they were doing a story, and our logo showed up on CNN. Freaked me out. Logged back into our servers. Then we started skinning things, and we did the whole trick we tried before, and we were Coca-Cola's first social media ad spend, and we were doing things with Green Day, and this is like National Geo and American Idol. We skinned everything. Heineken. Then we did Britney Spears, and I was like, this is not going to work, guys. I'm done. We got to think of something else. We were still the #1 Facebook app. We were still kind of at the top of the ranks. But then these guys came along. The fucking Farmville. Right? How did they beat us? That pissed me off. Like, they became #1. They beat us in the ranks. How did they do it? Well, they had this thing called paying customers, which we did not have at the time. We had ad revenue. We had all these complicated biz dev deals or sales deals that took months to execute. They had this thing called, like, people put credit card numbers into their site and paid for stuff. We had all the same sort of social gaming elements on our site, so it wasn't about sort of getting people to interact or getting people to share. It was that they had revenue. What we wanted to do, and what we had planned to do sort of since the beginning, is find a way to we had accumulated about 100 million users that had used our products online, right? How could we take all these users and make them go do stuff relating to revenue? How could we get them to pay for stuff? Even better, how can we get them to do stuff in the offline world, right? The O2O commerce space, online to offline commerce. We bought a company late in last year or middle of last year that did something like this. We took a lot of our users online and we connected them with offline events, kind of focused around beer, wine, and spirits. So we'd work with like a vodka company when they were launching a new brand, and we'd get a bunch of users to go show up at bars across the country. But one of our sales guys, and part of the acquisition was we had a local sales team. He would like go to a bar and talk to the bar owner, and he'd walk past a restaurant. He'd go to another bar and he'd walk past a spa. And this whole social commerce thing was happening, and that's sort of how we wound up with LivingSocial now, which is a social commerce platform. E-commerce is freaking cool. It's like credit cards, it's revenue, it's people, it's scalable. Back to the original idea, find something that's scalable and it gets really interesting. Like we were 4 people at the beginning, now we're hundreds of people, right? So that the company has entirely shifted direction, and we found an idea that we can really apply ourselves to and scale. I'm not going to talk much about that. Lessons learned sort of after all of these pivots, right? Execution matters and ideas don't. right? I would argue there are no new ideas in the world. Everyone, Fred Wilson, Union Square guy, has a blog post about this. I think he talks about a company that wanted to build listing software for eBay, sort of tried, didn't do it. They got beat out by the punch by someone else. There's tons of examples of execution winning in the market. And I think that's something that we pride ourselves on, is building quickly and building effectively. Don't talk yourself out of ideas. So the idea that was brought up earlier, something I mentioned last night at a different talk, is if your brand, like how many people in this room work at a startup? How many people have worked at a startup for more than 6 months? And how many people sort of work for the man? Somebody else. You're your own man, that doesn't count. You play songs on stage. So test the hell out of everything. One of the ideas that I talk about is take the money you were going to spend at the bar tonight and go spend it on Google AdWords, right? It only takes a few hundred words in advertisement. Pick 3 different logos, buy ads for them. Whatever people click on, that's the name of your new company. Congratulations, right? Whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on Google, it's so cheap to test this stuff. Like minimum viable product? No, minimum viable idea. You don't need to build anything to validate the concept. Build a landing page that does absolutely nothing. Forget that. You don't even have to build a landing page. You just have to build the ad, right? This is very, very easy to do when you're first starting out, and you don't need to invest a lot. You don't need to hire a ton of people to build a landing page with a picture or just some words to see if there's interest. Build your toolbox. This is really, really important. So as we were working on all these products, we'd build up all these assets. We could only build the Pick Your 5 application in 2 hours because we had all these assets and this software and this technology and ability to test and would deploy software dozens and dozens of times a day to iterate. We had all these things in place, which meant we were now able to take on whatever idea we came up with, right? Really important is don't throw things away. Keep them to the side because you might need some of that later on. Intrapreneurs Rule. So this is the idea that we're not entrepreneurs. There are people inside of your company that may have really killer ideas. Support them. It's kind of like the Google 20% project idea. It's kind of like the hackathon idea. It's a real thing. If you've hired people you care about, they're smart, they're going to come up with stuff, support them. Pick Your 5 is a great example of sort of a late night South by Southwest, what if we did night, and we went off, we built it, and it turned out to be probably the fastest organically growing social app on Facebook. JSIO. Does anyone know what that stands for? Just shit it out. Get it done. Don't talk about it. Don't have meetings. Don't think about it. Don't ask your mom what she thinks. Do it. If you have 2 ideas and you're arguing with a friend, which is better, do both. Just get it on the internet and get some feedback. Whether you want to use things like usertesting.com, which does like little videos and voiceovers of people using your site, or you want to do Google AdWords and you spend $100 on 5 different logos and see what people click on, all that matters is you get it done, because that's the only way to actually get feedback to see if what you're doing matters. There are hundreds of products and stupid little apps we built throughout the past 3 years, most of which failed. But because each one of them only took an hour in investment, that's all that mattered. We could move on. It was cheap. If we spent 3 months building something, that was way too long. We push code hundreds of times a day, right? JSIO. And I think this is one of the most important things for us as a company is don't ever be satiated. I'm never happy with anything I've ever built. I know there's a way to make it better. I'm just not a happy person with the products I build. But I think that's a characteristic of being an entrepreneur, right? I think that's just in my DNA that I know it can be better. And I think that's sort of why we kept building businesses, right? We kept pivoting our company because we were never happy with where we got. There were all these plateaus, and we could have stayed with consulting. It's a multi-million-dollar business we were building, but we decided, screw that. We called customers and we said, we're not going to build anything for you anymore. We're going to cancel this contract. We're done. We went off, we raised a little bit of money, and we focused on our product ideas. I don't know why they gave us money at the beginning, because the ideas turned out to not be that great, but they believed in us as people, and that's what's cool. When you get early investors, it's really not about the idea, it's about the team, right? And the people that invested early probably knew better than we did that our idea wasn't going to work. But never be satiated is really important. I don't know if the idea we have now is going to be the one that ends the company. You know, LivingSocial is about an experience that you become a part of, right? There may be another idea down the road that we take all these assets that we've built, just like we did the 3 other times, and turn it into something else. You may buy a Groupon, but you join LivingSocial. There's more coming, right? This is about an experience. It's about you living and being social. So I still don't think we're satiated. And we're probably going to pivot again. That's it. Any questions?
Yeah, which, out of the cities that you guys launched in, which one surprised you the most? Why?
Out of the cities we launched in, which one surprised us the most? I didn't talk about cities at all. I think small cities, large cities, I think it's very interesting. The model works kind of everywhere. We've launched in really small places we thought didn't have the population density to be revenue positive as a city. It's proven positive. I don't think I could name one offhand. Like, you're throwing away real money. Like, we had an MSA with Disney. We could have built all kinds of stuff, right? But we just weren't happy. So we stopped doing it. Well, that's why we did that rotation thing I talked about. So if you have a small team of people, and I really believe start a startup with friends, or at least a couple co-founders, doing it alone is really, really hard. We started with 4 because we actually have an interesting mix of skill sets among us. And early on, we had no cash. We didn't even pay ourselves. We rotated, right? One guy got to work on our own stuff, and the rest had to go pay all of our salaries, right? It works. It worked. Anybody else? They were a few months before us.
Yeah. So do you find yourself ever looking at them and saying, we should do what they're doing, but better, and here's how to do it? Like, how do you take a look at the competition and as you start to think, especially if you're in a mindset of pivoting, right? Do you ever feel like you're getting the itch to pivot closer to somebody else who appears to be doing it better?
Do you ever get the itch to pivot closer to somebody? I think the question is, my response to that is it's not about their idea. It's if you can do their idea better than them, right? It's about execution. It goes back to that, right? Look at the social gaming space. Look at the Zyngas. Look at the SGNs. Look at those folks in the world. There's only like 4 or 5 social game mechanics that they all use. No one invented anything. They each just put a different face on it, right? Arguably, they're all Zynga clones. Not a lot of TechCrunch articles about that, but they're all, clones of each other, right? It's not about copying competitors. It's about just doing better and executing better. I think that's my answer. And I would argue we do have differences in strategy, and we do have differences in how we execute. They're real. There's also 500 competitors, so it's fun. Any other questions? I think the space is really, really early. I think if you asked yourself 18 months ago how you spent money online at local businesses, the answer was you didn't. I think the same applies to other. This is transformational for local businesses. This takes small restaurants, small companies, and gives them a future. It makes them hire people because we sent them so many customers, right? I think it's just a really early space. I don't know what's going to happen over the next 18 months. But if we've done so much for so many small businesses, this is the target market that Google sort of hasn't reached yet, right? These people don't understand necessarily self-serve advertising platforms. They don't get it. They're just trying to run their business. This is their baby. They needed something, they asked their brother's friend for X. They needed something else, they asked their sister's friend for Y. It's a very different market, and we found a way to reach them. The space has found a way to reach them. But I think we're like the first or second inning. Do I find what I'm doing a challenge or a love? I think it's both. I absolutely love what I do every day. I mean, I am a geek. I hack on code. I manage a team, but I would prefer to just hack on code. It's what I love to do. I wake up and I think about it in the shower. Like, that's just me. I do. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are kind of the same way. It's kind of baked into our DNA. This is also one of the hardest things I've ever done, right? Scaling a company from 4 people to 10, 15 times that in the number of employees, that's hard, right? There are challenges there that I didn't know how to do yesterday, but we're figuring out, right? It's really hard. But I've never had more fun in my entire life. I can say that for sure. Thanks.